Like some people, there are certain brutal cars with a menacing image and hard to drive. It happens especially if they are dark colors. Some have been created especially for movies or television series, while others make your hair stand on end without any help from the screens. For this reason, here are the most brutal cars you must see. But before we start, please like and subscribe to this channel, and then sit back and relax. Ford Model T. The Ford Model T represents the standardization of the automobile for the entire general public. Ford sold more than 15 million vehicles, and given its philosophy of low cost to offer a competitive price, all the safety components it had at its introduction in 1908 were a horn, headlights, and a windshield. Even Henry Ford refused to install front brakes to cut costs. Since its creation, it has established itself as one of the proper names in the automotive world, with a figure and name recognized throughout the world, thanks to Ford's efforts to make it the definitive car. With the production of the Ford Model T came something that made cars start to cost a little less than usual. With mass production, Ford managed to lower, for example, the final price of the Model T to $260 in 1925, when in 1908 it cost an outrageous $825. This may be somewhat more delicate to analyze, but with the arrival of the production plants, another benefit for workers came: the interprofessional minimum wage of $5. In addition, it brought with it the 8-hour workday and gave work to women and immigrants. Although it may seem silly, the arrival of the Ford Model T meant the standardization of the position of the steering wheel. Until then, depending on the model and manufacturer, the steering wheel could be located on the left, right, or even in the center. Although the legend is that all Ford Model T left the factory with the body painted in black, the truth is that this theory is not true. But during the first years of production and the last, the variety of colors went from red to gray, passing through green or blue. Of course, being such dark tones of the colors, many people confuse them with black. Chevrolet Corvair. The Chevrolet Corvair, created by the engineer Edward N. Cole, had the appearance of a sedan, with the engine in the rear and air-cooled, something unusual in the North American market. Later, the engineering flaws eventually came to light and sullied the good name of the car. The rear engine made it easier to drive on muddy or snowy terrain, but under normal conditions, problems began to arise. For starters, a strong gust of wind or taking a sharp turn could throw the car out of level and make it difficult to drive. The design of the rear suspension that we explained before meant that, in tight corners, or if you hit a bump at a certain speed, the wheel supports would deform and not recover their original position, causing a lot of tire wear and tear. In all honesty, it must be said that most drivers did not suffer any mishap, but if a sudden maneuver was made, it was very possible to suffer a rollover, with several lawsuits on the table, where there were several deaths, most famously that of comedian Ernie Kovacs. In 1965, Chevrolet ordered a major overhaul of the Corvair's suspension system. The Corvair gained fame as a dangerous car in 1965 as a result of a book that cataloged it as such, Pasha 911 to 901. The first generation of the Pasha 911 was responsible for creating the foundations on which the myth of the German model has been built, one of the leading models in its segment for decades and one of the most victorious models in the history of the competition. The iconic Pasha 911, in addition to revolutionizing the sports car sector on its appearance in 1964, represented a death trap given the configuration it gives him fame to this day. The fact of equipping the engine and the rear part made the steering imprecise and tended to oversteer. Therefore, Pasha installed steel weights in the bumper until the entry of the 930 whale-tail generation, when they improved aerodynamics. Today, an all-wheel drive system and traction control correct all these suicidal impulses from the original 911. Ford Pinto. The Pinto perfectly represents the facet of a dangerous car, as well as being unfortunately contrasted with more than 900 victims caused by a ruptured fuel tank in an accident. This was his biggest problem. Because of the intention to reduce costs, Ford refused to pay $1 per car to install the system that prevented the rupture of the tank. In 1977, it became known that the firm of the Blue Oval knew of this defect and refused to solve it, preferring to pay individual demands. In 1978, he finally agreed to install this security system on all 1.5 million Pintos sold, although it was too late for many people. DeLorean DMC-12. The design that made it so famous was at the same time a death trap. When John DeLorean left General Motors in the 1970s, his idea was to build a safe car, although when they opted to couple a fiberglass chassis to a stainless steel body, crash tests proved a huge failure. The gull-wing doors didn't help either, as in the event of a rollover, the occupants had no way to exit the vehicle. If you like this emblematic car, surely you already know its ending. What nobody knew is that the vehicle was far from dead. Since then, it has not only become a cult car, but has also made public appearances, such as at CES in 2014. Pontiac Fiero. When General Motors began to suffer from a lack of enthusiast-focused models in the 1980s, Pontiac Fiero came to the rescue that lost excitement with a big bang. This iconic two-door roadster is Pontiac's first mid-engine car since 1938. With a mission to demonstrate the manufacturer's capabilities, innovative designers George Miladrag and Hulky Aldacacti were brought in to provide an alternative to the sports market. Its composition made up of multiple panels, hidden front lights, and a super aerodynamic design captivated the automotive world. This vehicle, born 6 years before the Mazda MX-5, seemed to have the formula to be a success in the market. This 1980s sports car hit the market in 1984, and a series of engine problems caused countless fires. In 1985, these fires were solved with the advent of restyling. But in 1987, there were already 260 burned-out Pontiac Fieros, for which the bad reputation given by the press led to their withdrawal in 1988. Yugo GV. This Serbian utility concept reached the United States, united in 1985. The Yugo GV didn't catch on at first, due to its atrocious construction and unreliability. In 1989, when the Yugo's lightweight and terrifying handling made an appearance in Michigan's winter weather, a 31-year-old girl fell from the Mackinac Bridge into Lake Michigan, losing her life. In the press, the Yugo starred in some well-known sites, such as one in the New York Times in 1985, with the following statement: "The worst car in history." Also in Time magazine, in 2007, it appeared in the list of the 50 worst cars of all time, in which we find the Yugo GV of 1985. In addition, there is a book by Jason Vuk entitled The Yugo, The Rise and Fall of the Worst Car in History, where he explains a little about the history of this car so peculiar for its passage through the United States. The reputation was already in tatters, and the outbreak of the Bosnian conflict forced the Yugo to leave the market in 1992. Ford Bronco II. The Ford Bronco II, during its 7 years in the market, started the fashion for SUVs in the American continent, as well as representing a tough rival for the Jeep Cherokee. It was built based on a Ford Ranger pickup, so its height, its short wheelbase, and its narrowness made it susceptible to overturning easily. Bronco II is much smaller and more manageable, and designed with hood-mounted engines like the Colon V6 of the Capri 2.8 injection. Aesthetically, it was also something different and showed a design very similar to that of the Ford Ranger of those years. A curious fact is that the Bronco II had very little stability, so it was prone to tipping, something that the first generations of the Explorer also suffered, and that cost Ford several million in compensation to customers. In 1990, a study found that up to 70 people a year were killed by Bronco II rollovers. Shortly after the study was published, it was replaced by the longer Ford Explorer. Chevrolet Cobalt. The robust appearance of the Chevrolet Cobalt is reinforced by showing a favorable height above the ground, ideal for tracks, complemented by rounded lines that make up a sober and simple design. The same happens at the back, with large brake lights arranged vertically but reaching to stretch to the sides. Its inner end is marked with the beginning of the trunk hatch, which offers a very remarkable capacity of 563 liters, a figure even greater than that of vehicles in a higher segment. But the Cobalt represents one of General Motors' darkest episodes. Like the Pinto, it represented access to the range, but the faults detected with the ignition system caused one of the biggest scandals in automotive history. This system would disconnect at full speed and shut down all safety components, causing millions of accidents throughout the United States. This problem was known to General Motors, and they tried to hide it. To this day, he is trying to compensate the thousands of victims. Ferrari 458 Italia. Faced with a groundbreaking exterior design, the interior of the Ferrari 458 Italia is somewhat more conservative, or at least it seems a more logical evolution of its predecessor. It is naturally oriented towards the driver, with a control layout that wraps around the driver. In addition, the driving interface has been redesigned, integrating the main controls on the steering wheel and leaving the secondary functions for the instrumentation that is somewhat further away from the driver's hands. The aerators have a shape inspired by the chimney that Formula One models showed until a few seasons ago. The defects with heat and flash fires of the Ferrari 458 Italia are known, making it one of the last most brutal cars on our list. It all started after its launch when the vast majority of units suffered from this defect. The problem was in an adhesive that served to hold the car's fenders together, but these turned out to be flammable and were placed near the exhaust, where they caused 1,248 fires. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, the subscription button, and the notification bell. To get notified when new videos are uploaded from this channel, please share your thoughts about the most brutal cars you must see in the comment section below. Thank you.